So he finally sees that the teacher leaves. So he goes in. What could be here? He climbs into the window. He looks around. He sees that nobody's there, so he goes. He tries to hurry. So he sets down everything before the security guards get there. Then he opens it up. Grabs everything in the concoction. Everything starts to flutter up and everything. And he doesn't think anything's wrong. He thinks nothing's wrong at all. But when he sits down and puts his head down, comes back up and didn't even notice that there was a fog that came out of it. He didn't think anything at first. So he grabs his stuff and he gets everything and he remembers, hey, isn't there somebody here that owes me something? So he starts looking around. Starts looking around for stuff. At first he can't find nothing. Man, all the students took everything. He starts looking around and looking around. He's like, man, what do I do? So he puts his stuff down and he starts going through all of the stuff. Goes into the teachers. Then he says, ha! It's like, that's what they get. So he takes off. And he grabs 2 more things that was laying there and just moves it. So he decides, well, I guess it's time to go. So he leaves. And when he leaves, he's ready to go. And he says, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And then he leaves something. And he says, all right. He puts it there. And he leaves it. And then he goes into the night. And he calls up his girl. Hey, Melissa, meet me over there near the school. She's like, why? He's like, I got something cool to show you. She's like, oh, okay, I'll be right there. So he goes and he starts waiting and waiting. And she comes up. He sees her go. And he goes, oh, let's go then. So they start walking and going together. And he's looking at things and starts thinking, I hope this potion works. And then he forgets. He's like, shit, I totally forgot. I'm missing another ingredient. So he starts looking around. And he tells her, hey, keep your eyes peeled. And she's like, what? He's like, I'm looking for a fireball. She's like, a fireball? He's like, yeah, I really need it for my class project, or else my drink isn't gonna work. I'm not gonna be able to win the science fair. So she says, all right, well, let me look around. So she's looking around, and he is too. He's just skimming through things. He's like, man, where did I see it? So they keep looking around, walking everywhere. And he's like, hey, do you have a lot of time, or are you in a rush? She's like, no, I got some time. Why? He's like, I want to show you this romantic spot. And she's like, well, what did you want to show me? He's like, well, it won't be too fast, but like I want to spend some time with you, and we can look at it, and we can have this drink that I just made. And she's like, oh, okay. She's like, well, do you have a cigarette? He was like, yeah, I got a cigarette. He's like, where is it? So he starts looking around, and he can't find it. And finally, I think he spots it. No, he doesn't. He keeps looking and looking and looking. So where did it go? So he says, you know what? He's like, I'm just gonna put some of this. And he grabs a water bottle, shakes it a little bit, throws it in there. And then he goes, and he gets ready to go. And then he notices something else. He says, well, he's like, let me put a little bit of this. Something from Kentucky. So he puts a little bit. And so he starts leaving. Looking around. Oh, let's see. And so he starts to think to himself, maybe this is the perfect time to do the trick. So he says, hey, he's like, by any chance, did you bring that little broomstick that I asked for? She's like, yeah, why? He's like, oh, it's because the cup got a little bit dirty. I gotta clean it. She's like, oh, okay. So he starts looking around. He's like, perfect. And she pulls it out. So then he says, you want to see a cool trick? She's like, what kind of trick do you know how to do? He's like, check it out. So he puts his stuff down. He grabs his stuff. And he says, he pulls out his stick, his wand. And then he goes like this. Put your stuff, just put it down right there on the chair. So she's like, all right. He's like, look at this. This is pretty cool. I learned this trick a long time ago. He's like, I'm gonna turn that broomstick into a cool stick. She's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, watch, check it out. So he goes, 1. He starts spinning his stick around. And he says, I want you to turn into a stick. And he goes like that. Boom! All of a sudden, it turns into a stick. And she's like, wow, how did you do that? He's like, well, he's like, I know a lot of cool tricks. So he goes like that, and he's like, well, he's like, let me use this one for a while. So he puts away his grandpa's stick that he gave him. And so he goes and he says, all right, well, let's keep going. She's like, all right. So he grabs his stuff, grabs his drink, grabs the potion, and they start walking. They're walking everywhere together. Boom, boom, boom. And he says, all right, well, there's this cool little romantic spot. And she's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, let me go over there real quick. And so he starts walking over there. He's like, yeah, it's a cool little place to smoke. We'll have a little bit of privacy, and it'll be like something we can always remember. She's like, all right. So they're walking. walking and walking. They start talking. He's like, hey, you know how things been for you? And she's like, oh, it's pretty good. I was like, oh, that's good. She's like, yeah, I know this guy. And he's like, well, what guy? And she's like, well, he was taken into CPS real young. And about 3 years old, something bad had happened. I was like, really? And I was like, what's his name? And she's like, Adrian. I was like, Adrian? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, why did that happen? And she's like, well, his mom found out that he could be getting in a lot of trouble. And so she gave him up and sent him over there. She thought it would be better for him, or I don't think she really cared. And so, I don't know, can you pray for him? And I said, yeah, I'll pray for him and everything. She's like, oh, that's good. And I was like, I'll keep praying, don't worry. And she's like, all right. So he keeps going, and I was like, wow, how have you been? Well, other than that, I guess things are normal, same old same, you know? I was like, oh, it's not bad. I guess if the same old same is what makes you happy. She's like, well, it does the job. So he keeps going on, and keeps doing what he does. And so they keep going and going and going. She's like, what about you? And he's like, well, I'm doing all right. I mean, a lot better than before. She's like, oh, that's good. He's like, yeah, I've been trying to really work on this. And I'm trying to get good grades because, you know, it's always good to have good grades. And she's like, well, that's good. You've always been kind of creative, I guess. Yeah, a little bit. She's like, well, what about sports? And I was like, well, you know, I like to watch the sports games, but I don't really play them. I stopped playing the sports games. I just watch them now. She said, oh, well, you used to be a very sporty person. I said, yeah, I know. I used to be. Now I'm trying to change all that. She's like, why is that? Oh, because, you know, some things just really change you when it means a lot to you, you know? She's like, well, I get what you mean in a sense, I guess. And he's like, oh, well, it's all right, I guess. It's everybody's life. You make your own decisions. So he goes about his trying to talk to her. And they get closer and closer to where they were going. He starts looking around. He's like, man, it looks like everything's all deserted and everything. I'm like, yeah. Okay, well, I think it would be pretty cool to start getting started pretty soon. She's like, well, what were you planning on wanting to do? And, oh, well, I just wanted to spend some alone time with you. And, you know, just talk about things because it's been so long. I just wanted to catch up. So, okay. And I was like, well, you remember all the things we used to do? She's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I remember when I was all throwing up. And then you were like kind of there trying to take care of me in a sense. So yeah, I remember that. Oh, that's good. I was like, oh, I remember when I got in that fight. I was like, yeah, I remember that. I was like, gosh, got a lot of memories, huh? So yeah, good and bad ones like everything else, huh? Yeah, you know, I really cared about you. She's like, oh, I really care about you too. Oh, it's not bad. That's why I made this little potion. She's like, what is that? I was like, it's supposed to be like a remembrance, like a little love drink. Like, oh, bad. So where are we going? I was thinking we go do something real fast to remember some memories. I don't know if you remember. She's like, oh, remember that place? I said, yeah, I remember it. Don't you? Yeah, I do. So, oh, that's cool. I said, well, I remember a lot of things too. I remember a lot. And let's try to get this this potion settled out and started. She's like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, I remember the bleachers. Remember that? And she's like, what do you mean the bleachers? It's like, yeah, we were smoking a cigarette there once. Don't you remember? She's like, yeah. She's like, oh yeah, I totally remember that. So yeah, we were smoking a cigarette. Don't you remember you were wearing like some little skirt? She's like, yeah. I was like, do you also remember that we were there and you were like the cheerleader and everything? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's not bad. I was like, here, watch, let me mix this up real quick. So he starts to mix it up, mix it up, mix it up. Spins it, spins it, spins it. And then he hears a noise. Ah! I said, what the hell was that? And he could hear screaming. Ah! Ah! And all they heard was, what the hell was that? And she's like, oh my God, I'm a little scared, I'm a little nervous. And then from a distance, on the other side of the football field, they see somebody walking at them slowly. And he's looking at them, and they're like, what the hell is that? And he's like, you know what? It's kind of creepy. It's like, maybe we should just leave. She's like, why? What are we gonna do? He's like, I was gonna take you back onto the bleachers so we can go over there and smoke. But I see that somebody's on their way over here. She's like, really? She's like, I don't see it. I was like, you don't hear him? She's like, all you hear is, she's like, oh my gosh, I think I do hear him. He's like, oh my gosh. So he says, here, I want you to drink this. I was like, but before you do, let me do a magic trick to it. So then he pulls out a stick. And he starts to mix it. Taps the cup. And then he says, love is a beautiful thing. So don't play with it. Instead, enjoy it. And then the concoction just, a little bit of smoke came out. And he thought everything was good. And as soon as she grabs it, she's about to drink it. And then it starts to change a different color. He's like, wait, don't. And she ends up drinking it all. Boom. And he looks at her and he's like, what the heck was that? He's like, shit, I think it was the freaking, the apple that fell in there. And then she starts twitching. Ah, 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 and she starts screaming. Ah! And he's like, what the fuck was that? And she starts turning green. And then her nose starts getting really long. And then she starts growing a mole. She gets a big mole everywhere all over her. And she looks around. She starts laughing. And she looks at him and she punches him. Boom! He just falls on the ground. And then she says, you owe me so much now. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you owe me so much for all this time. She starts laughing. I'm gonna be famous for this. And she punches him again. boom. And he keeps getting punched. Boom, boom. And she starts laughing. He's like, what's going on with you? What's wrong with you? And she says, you thought that I could love you or care. And she starts laughing. And she's like, give me that stupid stick of yours. And she grabs it. And she says, your love is nothing but a bunch of hocus pocus. And then she gets on her stick. And then it starts floating. And she's like, you're a nobody. You're a nothing. And she's like, I forgot to tell you, I care about somebody more than you right now. I was like, he lays there and he says, I can't believe it. He's like, so the rumors are true? And she says, yeah. And she's like, everything that you owe me, you're gonna give to me. And then he looks at her and says, I won't. She says, then I'm gonna take your broom. And then she says, up, up. Let's go do some hocus pocus. And then she gets on her stick and just flies off. She starts riding through the sky real fast. He's like, what the hell is that? And she starts screaming in the night, ah, I am the witch. And she's flying around. And she says, I have the power now. And she starts flying through the skies everywhere. And when he's looking around, he's like, what the hell was that? And you could hear a noise. So he gets a little scared. And he's like, shit. He takes off his shades to look around. Puts them up at the top of his head. He's like, is that you, Melissa? Where are you? Where are you? He gets all depressed and sad because he saw her fly off like that. And he remembers her parents' house was close by, so he goes and he tells him, here, I don't know what I owe her, but here, you could have this. And he gives the dad some money. You could have this. And then he takes off. He leaves and goes outside. And then all you hear is a scream. Ah! And all you hear is, and then you hear another scream. Ah! And then you can hear her flying by. Ah! And the whole time he's thinking that she did something. He didn't know what was going on. He just kept looking everywhere. And he could hear screams every now and then. Ah! That's what you hear everywhere. So he gets a drink and he starts looking around. And he looks at it and says, no. Something's awfully wrong. Something's very awfully wrong. And he keeps walking around looking. He's like, shit. What do I do? And he keeps looking around. And he can hear her still in the air. Ah! And he keeps looking around. And you can still hear the screams. Ah! He's like, shit. It's Halloween. He's like, what do I do? So he pulls out the sword. And then he goes like this. And then he taps himself. And then he just says, in the night, be a cat. Be at stealth. And stick to the alleys. Boom! And he hits himself one more time. And then he turns into a cat. And he says, meow. And he starts walking around. And he takes off. Goes running into the alley. And then all the cats see him. And he looks at them. So he stays in the alley with them. And they all hear the noises of all that Halloween night. And they just keep looking. And then you hear one of them say, and all the cats just start popping up. So he does it too. And then he sees them all running off. So he follows them. And he goes with them. And they all go together. And then they see everybody was slowly turning into marranos.